Cool. So, DERF Designs. First question: what's your first name, man? I never learned it.
It's actually just Fred. Like DERF is just Fred backwards. Um,
Yo,
it's not particularly inspired or anything. It's actually it's a nickname I picked up as a kid because I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Short Circuit 2, but the main character Johnny Five has like a malfunction towards the end, and he's talking to one of the main characters, and that character's name is Fred, and he's trying to tell him I'm fine, and he's like, I'm perfectly okay, DERF, and he's like, my name's Fred, and he's like, that's what I said, DERF. He's like, I'm fine, and it just kind of stuck. And once I started, I guess drawing quote professionally, I figured I needed some kind of like either like a moniker, a brand name, or something. So I'm a big fan of old school stuff to begin with. So I figured I might as well go with an old school nickname.
that's really cool. What was the name of the movie you said?
Short Circuit 2. It's an old '80s movie. I was about to say slightly problematic, but it's actually extremely problematic because it has not aged well in any way, shape, or form. And one of the main characters is like a white guy playing an Indian guy with a horrible accent, and it's just when you look at it with like a 2021 lens, it's rough, but it's one of those things that like is a product of its time. So I'll let it slide because I watched that movie probably hundreds of times as a kid and even now as an adult, but definitely as a more, I guess, socially conscious adult, it can be a hard watch sometimes because it's a real bad
Yeah,
accent. They've got him in this terrible brown face makeup. It's rough, man. It's real rough.
yeah. I know exactly what movie you're talking about, and it
Yeah,
came up on like some documentary about wokeness, and which is cool. I mean, I'm glad, but
yeah,
yeah, it is a classic. I loved that movie growing up.
yeah. Same,
I
man.
just
Same. I
didn't remember
watched
the
it many, many
title for
times.
some reason.
Yeah, much better than the first one. One of the rare occasions where the
That's
sequel is far superior.
It's very rare.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So you grew up watching Short Circuit. Where are you from, man?
I'm actually originally from New York. I've been in Houston here for like 10 years, but I moved to Houston when I was about 27 from New York. So
Nice. So you were born and raised out in New York. What part?
I was born in the Bronx, and then, like most families that live in the Bronx and usually kind of live in like dire straits, you either the Bronx is one of those places where you either like stay there forever because you just love it, no matter how rough it can be, or a lot of parents will just bust their asses as hard as they possibly can to get out, and that's what my parents did. So they moved to Yonkers, which is right next door. It tends to get a lot of shit talking because it's like just close enough to the five boroughs, but kind of just far enough away where if somebody lives in like the proper five boroughs, like Manhattan or the Bronx or like Queens or something like that, they're you say Yonkers, and to them it's like upstate New York, even though it's 5 minutes from the Bronx and 30 minutes from Manhattan. You know what I mean? So, but I was lucky enough to where even though we moved out of there, we stayed really tight with our family in the Bronx, and I always had kind of friends all over New York. So I think I was lucky enough to not. It's like a weird small working class town, and it's not something you typically like associate with like New York, but it still has all those like New York influences. So it's like a weird kind of like the redheaded stepchild of the five boroughs, I would say. Like where, like I said, we're just close enough to where we get a lot of the influence, but anybody who lives in the city proper is almost always going to knock me shit. I mean, my friends that still live out in the five boroughs, they still bust my balls about being a quote Yonkers kid. You know what I mean? So but like I said, I was real lucky to be able to kind of stay connected to our family there. And like I said, I've always had a lot of friends kind of all over. I hated just being in one place, which is why I ended up in Houston in the first place.
Yeah, dude, I bet. Um, so how did you are your parents from New York too, or how did they end up there?
They both of my parents were actually, so my mom was born in France. She lived there the majority of her life, spent a little time in Canada, but Quebec, which especially in like the 70s, was still basically little France, and like Montreal and stuff. But yeah, so my mom came here when she was in her late 30s, and then my dad was born and raised in Puerto Rico, and he came here as a teenager. So they just, he had family in New York. My mom had family in New York. It was just, I mean, especially back in the 70s and 80s, that's, if you were moving to the States, that's where you went. You know what I mean? And then eventually people will, start to branch out.
Yeah, man, that is definitely a classic American immigrant story. That's dope.
For sure, man. I'm very lucky that like I got to kind of experience that, and there's something so insanely unique to being raised by like immigrant parents, that I think like third and fourth generation folks just it's not something that they can even kind of remotely connect to. And that was one thing that like especially when I was a kid watching movies about like kids growing up, I was like, that's not my life. I have no idea what that's like, like because it's just you know being first generation is just totally different, and I guess you could technically say we're not first generation because my dad is Puerto Rican, which they are United States citizens, but it's still a totally different culture. You know what I mean? So um, but yeah, it was definitely a trip to experience that. And as an adult, I definitely have a lot more appreciation for it. When you're a kid, you're like, oh, well, my parents don't want to spend all this money on sneakers or toys or blah blah blah. But now as an adult, I'm like, well, shit, you guys were building a life, and you didn't have the luxury that all my friends' parents had, where they had a little bit of generational wealth to kind of bring that to that next step. My parents were working three jobs just to put us in private school, and we only really got to spend time with each other on the weekends and stuff. So it definitely, as an adult, I definitely appreciate. As a kid, you're like, well, why can't my parents be like everybody else's parents? But obviously, it's not realistic.
Yeah, yeah, it's hard. It's definitely hard. Something hard for kids to learn.
Yeah.
Um, and so did you have siblings, or do you have siblings?
Yeah, I've got an older sister. Technically, she's my half sister. We have different dads, but our family has always been the type to just kind of collect people along the way and create family. So I mean, I don't even think I really put two and two together until I was like maybe like 9 or 10 years old, and I remember asking my mom, I was like, "Why is my sister so white?" And why does she have a different last name? And it all just kind of clicked. And then I was like, well, you guys have different dads. And I was like, just my mind was fucking blown. Like I didn't, it was just my parents never presented it as like, this is your half brother, or this is your half sister. Or always just, family is family no matter how they show up. So she's 7 years older than
Heck
me.
yeah.
So definitely, I always joke that she and I we could not be more drastically different people. But no matter what, even with a pretty large age difference and stuff, we've always got each other's back. That's kind of how both sides of our family have always been like that. So
Yeah, that's awesome, man. And so is she more like is she like an accountant? You said drastically different. Like I feel like that's
uh
the most opposite from artists.
right. She no, I mean, it's just we just have very different personalities and just like drastically different interests. I mean, I always joke around that like she's never seen a Star Wars movie. Like, she's just she's great, and it's not to like shit talk her or anything. It's just she's one of those people that like was just kind of always destined to be like a suburban mom. You know what I mean? And nothing against that. But she's a Marine. She likes to follow the rules. She likes a clear set of boundaries. And as I'm sure you probably understand, as a creative type, that's our worst fucking nightmare. I don't like a lot of structure. I don't want to be told what to do. If you start yelling at me at 4 o'clock in the morning while I'm half asleep, I'm going to tell you to go fuck yourself, and I'll move on with my life. You know what I mean? So I think that's kind of where our core kind of differences come from.
Yeah, dude, that's pretty cool. That would be the other alternative to opposite of artist
Yeah,
is the a marine.
yeah, for sure, for
Oh
sure.
man, that's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, so French and Puerto Rican, you don't see. I've never met a French Puerto Rican person. Did you
Not
get
many
to
people have.
explore both cultures?
Yeah, that's one thing I got to say. My parents, and again, I think to kind of come back to that like first generation kid thing, there's so much more connection with your culture. And so, like my friends always used to like joke that like, well, how do you guys manage to, if you're so broke, how do you manage to go to France every summer and Puerto Rico every summer? My parents used to really work their asses off we would either split off, and one summer we would go to France to spend with our grandma, or the other summer we'd go to Puerto Rico to spend with our abuelita. And or some summers we got super lucky if my parents had a great year that we would go 1 month to France, 1 month to Puerto Rico. And my grandma would come and stay for like 6, 7 months. My Puerto Rican grandma actually lived when we still lived in the Bronx. She lived 4 doors down in the same apartment complex. And then she moved when we were about like maybe 6 or 7, and that was kind of around when I was old enough to travel. So we'd go there all the time. And Puerto Ricans are funny because they tend to like live their lives like what's the term? Folks who go down to like Florida all the time, snowbirds. Where as the weather changes, they'll go back and forth. Because New York is basically like especially the Bronx, it's like little Puerto Rico. You know what I mean? You've got all your like creature comforts, so it's not unusual, especially if someone's not working, where they'll come back to New York for 6, 7 months. They'll book a one-way ticket and just kind of go back when they feel like going back. So we were definitely lucky enough. And again, my dad, he speaks broken English and or Spanglish for the most part. My mom actually speaks French and Spanish. So we got like just a very crazy mix in our house of like, you'd get yelled at in 3 different languages. It would start in English, then turn to French, then end in Spanish. Um, so we definitely had a real tight, kind of connection to our roots, which again I think just kind of informs the 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 personalities of kids of immigrants in a really totally different way that I don't think a lot of second and third generation folks can really like understand.
Yeah, dude. Yeah, that is like the coolest growing up story I've ever heard, man. So do you speak French too and Spanish
um So actually, I
or
didn't. English was technically the third language I spoke because, like I said, I was always hearing either Spanish or French in my house because my sister and my mom. My sister was born in France and then immigrated here with my mom. So her and my mom always spoke French. And then my mom and my dad would speak Spanish to each other. And then there would be times where like I'd go to spend time with my grandma, and I'd come back to preschool, and they'd be like, we can't get him to speak English. He's refusing to speak it. And I would just speak in French for like the first 3 weeks of school. And and they would speak in English, and I would try to communicate back to him in French. So I definitely spoke it a lot better when I was younger. As you get older, kids are stupid. They just don't appreciate the things that like their parents do for them. So there was like for a long time I was like, well, I don't want to speak any other languages. I would say I can still understand it. The problem is that because I don't ever really use it. And I hear Spanish a lot more, being in Texas, and again with my mom and my dad speaking Spanish to each other pretty regularly. Um, it it'll start off in my head as French, and then because those love languages, they're all anything Latin based is it's all so similar, and it'll just start to come out as Spanish, and then I get all fucking confused, and then I just give up. You know what I mean? But I can understand it if like my relatives from France when they come over to visit, they all speak English because most people in Europe they have like at least some kind of semblance of English because so much of our media makes it over there. So I'll be like, you gotta fucking slow down, man. You're speaking way too much French. You've got 3 bottles of wine in you, and it's somehow speeding up. So I'll definitely have a little bit of trouble. But if people are speaking it relatively slowly, I can kind of hang. Which is definitely a thing I've noticed moving here to Texas, especially with like such a big Mexican community. The like Puerto Rican dialect is so drastically different from like Mexican, and there's so many different words that mean completely different things. That like I still have a hard time understanding folks that are like that are speaking Spanish to me, and with that like Mexican dialect, you know what I mean? So which is it really speaks volumes about how like totally diverse like Latin American and pretty much all like Latino culture really is. Like it's not all the same, and you could ask a whole lot of white folks in America, especially in Texas, and they just assume it's all the same and it's all Mexican, and it's like, bro, there's a whole lot of spots that we all come from, and we come in every shape, color, and size.
Yeah, man. It's a whole world of
Yeah,
cultures, you know.
for sure, for sure.
The first time, I'm Mexican, and my parents,
Yeah,
they spoke Spanish around us, and so I never like learned it fluently, but I can understand it, and I could respond in English, and some words I'll say in Spanish. Um,
yeah,
but the first time I met a Puerto Rican girl who spoke Spanish, she said, "I speak Spanish." I said, "Yeah, I understand Spanish," and she said something, and then ended it with "arroz con pollo."
yeah,
And it's span in it at home. It's arroz. They say all the letters arroz con pollo, and she said
yeah,
arroz con
yeah,
pollo, and
yeah.
I said what? She said it like 4 times. I could not understand.
Yeah.
And
I
then
mean, Puerto
anyway,
Ricans
she
are
was like,
famous
yeah,
for just kind
rice and
of
chicken.
we ride every vowel like it's one long word, you know? Um so like we just cut out whole letters of words because there ain't enough time for them.
Heck yeah, man. Yeah, I've gotten used to it. I love Puerto Rican Spanish, and I'm trying to learn other versions of Spanish. Colombian Spanish is tough for me,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
anyway. Um,
I'm sure it's probably an adjustment of being in
so New York,
Guatemala, right?
it is. They have a lot of inflection, and I sound rude when I speak Spanish because I'm a little monotone in Spanish, and they got like all these inflections. It's like they're singing, and I'm just like "Buenos dias," and they're like,
Yeah.
"Okay, whatever."
And like, oh, this guy's a fucking asshole. Fine.
Yeah. Yeah, dude. Exactly, man. So New York is the cultural capital of America. Some could say.
Yeah.
Um, and it's a melting pot. Obviously, you're proof of that. And you're from two super rich cultures, French, Puerto Rican, and now New York. How did that play into your development of like creativity as a child?
I mean, that's you're relatively familiar with kind of the work I do. I've always loved mixing stuff because everything in my whole life was just all mixed up. You know what I mean? Down even all the way down to just my friendship circles. Even as a kid, I had friends here, I had friends there, and no two looked the same. So that really, when I was a kid, I was always fascinated with like I like, for example, one story I was telling obviously when you realize how stupid this sounds as an adult, But you know, when I was a kid, I was, you know, I mean, what kid wasn't obsessed with Power Rangers? Um, and I remember one summer, you know, when we were in Puerto Rico, I would just spend all my time thinking up like different versions of stuff that I already enjoyed, you know. So if it was like Ninja Turtles, I would turn them into robots, or you know, I would drop my own I would draw my own Power Rangers rather. And I remember one summer I came up with one that was white and gold. And you know, I spent all my time, and I mean, I went through like every single color in the color pencils box, and you know, I worked all summer, and then that year was when Tommy stopped being the Green Ranger and became the White Ranger. And I wish I would have saved it, because I remember I used to write like the dates and my name on all of them. But you know, again, when you're an adult, you just don't realize that these things are important. Or rather, when you're a teenager and you like find all your old stuff as a kid. But I remember like they ripped me off. They had to have figured out I came up with the White Ranger, and it's like, no, you fucking idiot. You're a dumb 9-year old drawing pictures at your grandma's table. There's no way in hell that the people at Saban Films could have found out you were like working on a secret Power Ranger, you know? But that was definitely that's something that's always been my jam. I've just always kind of I'm a big appreciator of art forms. And so because of that, you know, I really like to take things that I love and kind of put my own spin on them, and mix things together. Especially now as I get older, I have a lot bigger appreciation for mixing things that, you know, might not make sense, or make sense, and you know, out in the world it's happening, but the art world may be ignoring it. You know what I mean? So that's kind of why I tend to my two biggest loves are, you know, comics and nerdy shit and hip hop. So a lot of my stuff, like the shirt I'm wearing, is a mixture of hip hop and like geek culture. And it's one of those weird things where, like, you know, the hip hop scene merch, at least not until recently, has never really been a big thing. But there's almost always a crossover. A lot of geeks are also really into hip hop, and a lot of hip hop people are really into like nerd culture. Um, Especially nowadays, because it's okay to be a geek. You know, when I was a kid, you got fucking destroyed for liking any of this shit. Um, but uh, but yeah, so I really just love to combine all that kind of stuff, and I think there's so much crossover with those two worlds. You listen to any hip hop record, more so probably the '90s and 2000s stuff. You know, most of those guys, there's comic book references, there's deep cut movie references, because hip hop is one of those things that like it was born out of taking bits and pieces of other stuff out of an appreciation of that. And so I think that's why it tends to really kind of inform stuff. I mean, I like everything. I like, you know, old school R&B, blues. You know, I love heavy metal. You know, I like kind of everything. I'm a unapologetic fan of Kesha and Britney Spears and Lady Gaga. I don't give a fuck how cheesy it is. It makes you move, and it's enjoyable, and I'm here for it. But anyway, you know, I think that really my love for hip hop is because it's just a crazy mishmash of so many different things. And I think that is really what kind of tends to inform my art. And again, it all kind of goes back to subconsciously how I was raised, which was a mishmash of everything. So.
Heck yeah, man. That's so cool. Yeah. I mean, Wu-Tang Clan were like I feel like the most vocal about their interest in like nerd culture, right?
Oh, big time, big time. I mean, you know, one of my favorite lines is, you know, where Inspector Deck says, you know, coming through your hood like your neighborhood Spider-Man. And I remember as a kid in '94, I was like, this fucking dude just rapped about my favorite hero. I've never heard that shit. And it wasn't like mocking, you know, that kind of stuff. There was a genuine appreciation. You know, you got Ghostface Killer went by, you know, one of his many pseudonyms is Tony Starks. You know, when a couple of the guys did like a mini Wu Tang album with just 3 members, they reached out to a comic book artist and had him draw them as comic book characters for the main cover. And RZA, RZA was like the kind of leader of Wu Tang. Basically, he's such a huge nerd. All of those guys are just really, really into pop culture. I mean, Method Man, he's now technically part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe since he was in Luke Cage. On a almost weekly basis, he posts about how he wants to be cast as Bishop when they reboot the X-Men. So those guys were the first. That was one of the many reasons why I fell in love with them, because those guys were just, they came out of nowhere. They had an insane sound that just nobody else had. They were talking about everything, and as an appreciator of everything, I love action movies, rom-coms. I'll watch an Oscar-worthy film. I love all that kind of stuff, and they were just talking about everything and referencing everything, and that was when I was like, oh, hip hop is more than just like some shit that's fun to dance to or make you bop your head. Like there's so many layers. And even now, I mean, I've listened to, Enter the 36 Chambers, I mean, probably thousands of times. And I know the songs by heart, and I'll catch a little euphemism that I didn't catch the first thousand times, or, a line that I've repeated many, many times in my head that I'm like, my brain, I'm like, okay, they're referencing this or referencing this. And then I'll be like, holy shit, I can't believe they were also squeezing this in, So um, those guys are just, I mean, they still are some of the greatest innovators of all time, man. Those dudes are responsible for, just, I mean, truly like putting New York on the map, far beyond what it was, because hip hop was just not taken as seriously, back in the 80s. And I think they just really brought like a true, like, dirty, grimy, like, just fuck you New York City attitude in everything they did. I mean, these guys were chopping up shitty old martial arts movies and stuff into their beats. The sound sounded terrible. Everything is scratchy and dark. And even the Bobito and Stretcher were one of the first guys to ever play Wu Tang. When they listened to it for the first time, they were just like, "What is this fucking madness?" Like, there's 9 dudes on a track. They're talking about horror movies and killing people. They got martial arts stuff in their beats. Like, this is dirty and grimy. And back then, that was kind of there was still that like that like cheesy kind of like a hibbity, like that, like, not to take any away from the old school guys, but hip hop on a mass scale was not like that, and it blew the doors off of everybody, man. I mean, it fucked everybody up across the board. Kids in the suburbs were listening to shit that they had never heard of, and they were being exposed to concepts of like 5% Nation and stuff that they would have never been exposed to, while also still hearing about stuff that they were really into. So it was really, man, that album, to this, I tell people all the time, like, there's just certain albums that just hit you and stay with you forever, and that is without a doubt one of them for me. So, which is why, if you notice, I make a lot of Wu-Tang mashup shirts, because I fucking love Wu-Tang.
Yeah, dude, I love your Wu-Tang mashups, man.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I love, and I'm big. I grew up on Ninja Turtles, and so
Yeah.
that shirt right there, that's definitely a dope shirt.
I appreciate it, man. Thank you very much.
Yeah, man. So you're talking about like you're raised during a time where these, not so new, but it was kind of like off mainstream things. You're
Yeah.
talking comic books, nerd stuff, and hip hop at the time, which was not really mainstream, but both huge pieces of Americana now.
Oh,
But
yeah.
then, yeah, but then is not. But then is still something new and, like you said, gritty. It might not be respected so much, but um, coming from Puerto Rican, such rich cultures, and French, what how did your parents like did your parents cultivate that in you, or did they kind of frown upon it, or how was
Um,
that?
I mean, my parents were always stupid supportive. More so my mom. My dad was just like, my dad was just like an old school Puerto Rican dad. He didn't have fucking time to worry about what I was interested in. You know what I mean? But I mean, I had every phase under the sun. I had the full on metalhead phase, and but And again, through kind of all those things, my mom was always like, look, you're a smart kid. I trust you to make the right judgment. You're listening to all this fucking crazy music about murder and mayhem and selling drugs and God knows what. But, she was like, as long as you don't turn into an asshole, that's all that really matters. So I was very lucky that they didn't so much cultivate it, but they let me do my thing, a lot of our family members would be like, why is he wearing this crazy white dude on his shirt with crazy makeup? And, he's got what looks like a Nazi symbol. It's, for context, not a Nazi symbol, but it was Marilyn Manson. He had that like red circle with the black lightning bolt, and he's this crazy white guy with black makeup. And, they were like, what the fuck is your kid wearing? My mom was like, look, he's into this shit. Who cares, a great example to kind of tie it back to my art is when I was a kid, I used to draw these like monsters, and I used to love, like all the Godzilla movies and the like kaiju movies and all those like shitty Japanese movies and like Ultraman and all that kind of stuff. Which I guess it all makes sense now that I think about my love for Power Rangers as a kid, because that was like a higher level version of that stuff. But I used to draw all these like monsters and crazy stuff. And my grandma, like most Latino grandmas, all abuelitas think that anything that looks like a monster is a demon. And so she used to always tell my mom, she'd be like, no, he's drawing all these demons. He's possessed. There's something, the devil has to be inside him. He's drawing all these monsters. And my mom is like, he likes fucking Godzilla movies. Like, my kid's not possessed. He's just into shit that we don't understand. And that was one thing that was always, I think, I really appreciate about my mom and how cool she was about. Like, she was like, look, I don't understand it, but you clearly have an insane affinity for it. If it makes you happy and it brings you joy, then do you. So like I said, I don't think they cultivated it, because they've, up until a few years ago, my mom had never seen a Star Wars movie. My parents have never seen any of those movies. They, I watched all this stuff by myself, partially because I was a latchkey kid like most kids in the 90s, and partially because nobody else that I lived with gave a fuck about any of the weird shit that I was really into. And I would just sit there and I burned out countless Star Wars VHSs just watching those movies over and over and over again. I would hog up the TV if they were on TV, even though I owned them on VHS. So they definitely were. They didn't give a shit about anything I was into, but they were all about me being into it. So
That's pretty
which
dope,
I
man.
think is just as good. You know what I mean? So like my wife, she's so lucky. I tell her all the time, because her family, they're all into really nerdy shit. They quote Star Wars on the regular. They know the ins and outs of like Starfleet Command. They watch Doctor Who, and they quote this stuff regularly, and they understand it. So the first time I ever had like a family dinner with her family, I was like, "You have the coolest family in the entire fucking world." I'm like, they get all the shit that we're into, because she's, just as much of a nerd as I am. So, but yeah, I don't know where I was going with that, but
No, that's so cool, man. That's so dope. Um, yeah, and I think the through line, and I've noticed this, is just a really good story and a really like deep mythology. Like
yeah,
like all the like any great rapper knows how to build a story either through a song or through an album.
yes,
Um, and then like the Wu-Tang Clan, they have different characters, so each one
yeah,
plays their own role in this mythology. And same with Star Wars and all the other all those stories that you're talking about. So that's
yeah. I mean, they literally painted themselves as like, martial art warriors, and talking about like, Wu Tang swords coming at you, and talking about like flying guillotines, and that's why I love those guys so much, because there's so much world building. So many of them are such incredible storytellers, and those are kind of the hip hop artists that I've always gravitated towards. Biggie, obviously, chief among them. I mean, one of hip hop's all time greatest storytellers. Obviously, there's the stuff like Juicy and Hypnotize, but even those kind of like radio joints, listening to them, there is so much happening in those fucking songs. So that's world building is definitely something I've always loved, and I think that's why I have such an affinity for Star Wars, because there's just so much lore to this stuff, and so much detail. And I'm a big fan of the details. I like shitty stuff too. Don't get me wrong. You know, give me a crappy action movie every day with virtually no plot, and I'm down. You know, like if it's vaguely funny and there's pretty explosions and some gunfights, I'm in, you know. But I also love really layered stuff like Star Wars or you know, kind of any of those like classic franchises that really have so much world building in them.
Yeah, man. That's I mean, in the Marvel Cinematic Universe right now.
Oh yeah,
Oh man, it's limitless content. Like we've been.
yeah, yeah. I mean, they can mine that. They can milk that fucking franchise for decades to come, and that's definitely another one of my like main loves. You know, I've always loved comics and stuff, but you know, as a kid, especially growing up in like the 80s and 90s, a comic book movie was unheard of. You know, we had one great one off with Batman and Batman Returns, and after that, a lot of it was shit. And you know, I mean, those Marvel movies, I'm completely obsessed with them. Me and my two best friends, we actually fly around to each other's cities twice a year to go see the movies on opening night together, so we can like experience it with a crowd, and we use it as an excuse to basically have what we call like grown man sleepovers. And we've been doing that for about 10 years now. We've started bringing in the family members. They bring their kids along now that they're a little bit older. Last year at the when we went to go see, or 2 years ago now rather, we went to go see Endgame, which was the kind of like culmination of, you know, 10 to 11 years of world building to tie it all back. um, we decided we were going to get matching tattoos because the stars of the movies got like a kind of like a symbol that was a mix of all of their different character symbols. So we took, you know, my favorite character, which is Spider-Man, my buddy Marcus's character, which is Captain America, my buddy Brian, his favorite is Hulk. We combined those three. We put a little honor to his son, who unfortunately passed a year previous to that coming out. So I take my Marvel movies very seriously. We spend most of the time leading up to a Marvel movie just talking about what might happen. We watch the movies over and over again, and we'll text each other at like 3 o'clock in the morning and be like, "Dude, I was just watching Black Panther, and he says something to this person, and I think it could mean this down the line." And you know, um, and part of that I think is inspired by us just being huge nerds who like to analyze shit and watch things over and over again. And a lot of that is because Marvel has done such an amazing job, especially in the later years, of, you know, not only doing a lot of world building, but teasing and working so many little things into. And you know, people thought it was silly that there was a line where, you know, Nick Fury says, "I can't eat, you know, toast if it's cut diagonally." And then you watch 3 or 4 movies before that movie, and he's eating toast that's cut diagonally. And now there are rumors that it might not have actually been Nick Fury. And come to find out, you know, when we watch Captain Marvel, it's not Nick Fury. You know what I mean? So
Yo.
they're I mean, those dudes over there playing fucking 4D chess at all times. So and I think you know, part of that is to set things up, and part of that is to appease the giant comic book nerds that just we live and breathe all these little details, and we love trying to figure out what you know, what might happen next, and you know, what could happen down the line, or whatever. So
Yeah, dude, that's so cool. And yeah, I love that. I love it for that reason too.
yeah,
And which is one of the reasons I started following your page. You know, just the style and all the, you know, the focus on those kind of nerd stuff. And I had seen that post about your tattoos and had read through
yeah.
it. It's such a cool story, man. How did y'all meet? Those you and Brian?
So we actually met so a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. Uh, Back when Twitter was for just pure internet weirdos and people who were kind of really connected to internet culture. You know, this was before Facebook was even like public to people. We were kind of part of a little crew of folks who used to like tell stupid ass jokes on Twitter, and we all kind of followed each other. And my best friend Marcus, he at the time, we just knew each other via Twitter. We would, laugh about stuff together, and then beyond the jokes, we started to realize like, oh well, he's referencing this dope movie that nobody knows about, or he's joking about this very specific comic book line, and then it went from like tweets back and forth to like DMs to like, yo man, you're cool enough to like let me give you my number. And nowadays that's not nearly as common, but 15, 16 years ago, it was insane to give a total stranger on the internet your phone number. And so he and I started texting, and then we actually we ended up. So we were one of the women that we joked with all the time and stuff, and like told like funny tweets or whatever. She started talking to this guy Brian, and then she was like, "Hey, he's super into all this shit that you guys are into. You guys should chat with him." And before you know it, he's part of the group chat. And so fast forward a couple of years, we're now in a group chat for years together. And we had just we were talking about the first Avengers movie, and we were all going to see it on opening night. But one of us, I lived here in Houston already. My buddy Brian lives in Buffalo. My buddy Marcus lives in Arizona. So we were all in different time zones. And we were planning out like, okay, do not text about the movie until this time when we know we've all seen it. And we're chatting, and we're like, oh my god, the fucking Hulk, and we're talking about all the lines we love, and and all this kind of stuff. And I suggested, I was like, hey, I know this sounds fucking crazy, but what if we tried to make a plan to see the next Avengers movie together? And they were like, I mean, without question, they were like, fuck yeah, I'm in. Yes, definitely. And so the next Avengers movie came out a couple years later, and we flew, to all one city to hang out with each other. And Brian and Marcus actually ended up meeting about a year or so before that, because they happened to be in town, and all of that coincided to where they decided to go to Vegas, my buddy Brian and Allie, to get married. And the night of the wedding, the girls went to go see. I think it was one of those. I think it's like the Full Monty or something like that. They went to go see some show, and the guys went to go see Amazing Spider-Man 2. And that was kind of right around the beginning of May. So Avengers 2 comes out. That's the beginning of May, which is normally when they drop these movies. So now over the years, after that we did one the next year, and then we're like, what if we did two this year? So now it's just a bi-yearly thing, and because it typically falls in May, or at least one of them always released in May. Whichever one released around that time, we try to make it a big family thing where the spouses come along and the kids come along, and we all get together and we celebrate the movie, we celebrate their anniversary, then they go off and do their own thing. And it really, I mean, now those are two gentlemen that I consider my family. And they were both just here for my wedding. They were the best man and groomsmen in my wedding. So it really is crazy how these things can really bring people together, all off of just like tweeting about nerdy shit and shitty action movies.
Yeah, dude, that is such a cool story, man. Yeah, I was just talking with my cousin, and she was talking about how like shitty or dark or evil so and so the internet is, but it's such a there's so much positive that comes from it too, and such a
Yeah.
great tool for connection, people that you would never
Yeah.
have met before.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm grateful every day that I met those guys. And had I not been dicking around on Twitter till 3 o'clock in the morning 15, 16 years ago, I would have never had these family members now, these guys that I consider my brother. And I have, one of the best things about it is, when we rewatch these movies, the ones that we get to see together, every time a certain scene pops up, we remember when we were all in the theater next to each other. My buddy always jokes, he's like, every time I watch Civil War, when Spider-Man shows up, I remember you grabbing my hand and being like, "He's finally fucking here!" Like, and we remember those things in those moments, and it really adds to our enjoyment of movies that we already love to pieces. And I would definitely say even the more lackluster movies that we've seen together, those hold such a special place in my heart because there's so much we look forward to it all year long, and we're talking about what could happen, and we're sharing theories, and then we typically get there a night before, and we watch the last couple of movies before that one, and we try to piece together what might happen, and then we get to the movie theater, and we're in line talking about theories, and then we come out and we're like, I can't believe this happened, and this moment was so dope, and then we end up normally, if time allows, we typically see the movie about 4 to 5 times on opening weekend. We'll go see it opening night. We see it the next morning. Then we see it that evening. Our record was for Black Panther. We saw it 6 times between Thursday and Saturday.
Wow.
And in fact, the last showing that we caught of it, we saw it in the morning and then went back to the theater a few hours later, and we're almost late for the flight home because the next showing like barely allowed any time for us to like drive back over to Bush and drop my buddies off. So, but and again, it's stuff that like it seems silly, but it's I think people bond over this kind of stuff the same way they bond over like watching their favorite sports team, and watching their team go to the Super Bowl or make it to the World Series and the playoffs. I've never been a huge sports fan, but like I think those two, while on their face seem like they're totally disconnected, I think there really is a lot of similarity between the like connection to moments in time that people have when they see these movies.
Oh yeah, definitely. Definitely. I mean, it's just a different, football, and if you pay like if you are a fan of it, it's essentially just the same thing. It's a story.
Yeah,
It's just a continual legend. There was this one hero that existed during this time,
yeah,
and now there's this new guy throwing the ball. So,
yeah, for sure. The only difference is that almost always the good guys are going to win on our side, which is
yep.
a lot better than watching some of my friends' blood pressure go through the roof when their team loses and then they're out for the rest of the fucking year. You know what I mean? So we're
Yeah,
definitely spoiled in that regard. We always know there's going to be a vaguely good outcome.
definitely. Yeah, I did. I can relate to that growing up as a Bears fan. So,
Yeah. Ooh. I mean, I don't follow sports, but I know Chicago has a tough time with their teams, man.
yeah, man, they do. And I don't watch it. I don't really watch anymore, but I grew up that way. But
Yeah.
man, that's so cool. So are you guys planning something for these, uh shows like
Yeah.
Loki's coming out soon?
So the shows we typically, we'll normally watch them the night that they premiere, and then we'll just pop into the group text real quick and be like, "Who's seen it?" And then we'll be like, "Okay, I'm gonna watch it at 10 o'clock tonight. All right, cool. I'm probably gonna watch it, first thing tomorrow morning." My buddy Marcus, he's a fiend, and he gets up at like on the night of release. He gets up at like 3 o'clock in the morning so he can watch it in peace without any of his kids interrupting. And like clockwork, at 4 a.m., he'll text me like, "Yo, that episode was fucking crazy. You guys got to stop whatever." We're like, "Bro, I have a job to go to. I can't watch this shit at 4 o'clock in the morning." But so we don't typically have a whole lot of plans for the TV shows. Especially since they're if they were released all at once, I would definitely say we would probably try to plan something around that. But because they're released week to week, it's not as big of an event as it's still lots of addition to the lore, and we still get just as excited. So this kind of the shows, I'd say, kind of supplement our excitement for what we call them paloozas. So whatever movie we're gonna go see, we'll call it something related to that. So like Endgame was Thanos Palooza. When we went to go see Deadpool, it was Deadpoolooza, even though it's not technically part of the MCU. We love Deadpool so much that it kind of became, it was like, as long as it's a comic book movie, it's within the range. So we're trying to figure out what the next one is going to be. There's quite a few movies finally coming out now that theaters are back open again. So I'm trying to convince them to make it Spider-Man because it's right around the holidays. And obviously I'm a little biased. But you know, we're considering either Shang-Chi or Spider-Man, or maybe even Eternals, because it's just so out of the realm of anything. And you know, I mean, I'm a huge comic book nerd, but that's one of those storylines that I'm not terribly familiar with.
Mhm.
And because of that, I'm really looking forward to it because I don't know shit about the Eternals other than the very basics. So it's near impossible for a comic book movie to surprise me. I can almost always see the writing on the wall, partially because I'm just a media junkie and I consume so much television and media. At any given time, I'm watching at least 6 or 7 series at once. So because of that, I'm notorious for like calling something and I'll be like, we'll be on the couch. And my wife and I are watching a TV show and I'll be like, and a character will say something to another character and I'll say what that character is about to say and they'll say it word for word. And she's like, how do you
Wow.
fucking do that? And I'm like, because it's a drama, it's set in this period. So I'm pretty sure they're going to say this. Um, so few things surprise all of us and the three of us are all like that, that it's really nice when things do surprise us and kind of catch us off guard. So I'm hoping maybe we do Eternals just so it's something new and exciting for all of us, you know, something that we're just totally not expecting in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah,
I just
man.
hope it doesn't suck.
It's they haven't made a movie that sucked for a while, so that's a good
Yeah.
sign.
Yeah, last one being Thor: Dark World.
Mhm.
That is the worst piece of shit. Uh, Next to Iron Man 2, because at least Iron Man 2 had some cool moments. But yeah, I mean, I totally trust in the Marvel, you know, brain trust. I mean, they've figured out the formula. They know what works. They know how to take just enough chances to keep people happy without it being cookie cutter, but know how to please everybody for the most part across the board. With exception of maybe some angry neckbeard dudes that don't like it when a female character gets to do anything other than be pretty.
Oh yeah.
Um, but I've got faith in them, and I think they've done a really good job with a lot of their weirder properties. Guardians of the Galaxy is not something that I expected to be as successful as it was. I mean, shit, even Thor Ragnarok, they took two relatively serious movies and turned them into a straight up fucking comedy. And it's one of the best movies that Marvel's ever put out because it took such huge risks and it paid major dividends. So I've got
Yeah,
faith in them, man.
yeah, man. Me too. Just yeah, for me, hot take. I didn't like any of the Thor movies until Ragnarok. So that was
Not even the first one.
I didn't like the first one for some reason. I don't know
Okay,
why.
okay.
Yeah, that was just
I'll say this: it's probably the one I revisit the least, because it had a lot. It had strong parts, but it wasn't an overall strong movie. Like Hawkeye was fucking shoehorned in there, and then you know they you know we didn't really know what the Tesseract was just yet. And that fucking metal monster that shoots fire out of his face, that was kind of cheesy, you know. But Chris Hemsworth was just so fantastic
oh
in
yeah.
the role. And I remember when they first teased, this is going back to the movie message board days, you know, where they would tease these things and talk about this stuff for years before. When they announced that they were making a Thor movie, I was like, this is a huge mistake. Um, because I just didn't think it would transfer well to real life. Same thing with Captain America. You know, Captain America, much like Superman, you know, he's kind of a fucking dork until you do a deep dive and you see some of the better Captain America stories. But when you don't really have, you know, when you just have like outside knowledge, or even inside now, I mean, me being a huge comic book nerd, I was always like, Captain America's a fucking nerd. And then you find out Captain America is a fucking OG who, you know, he might be wearing the stars and stripes, but he hates, you know, authoritarian governments. he believes in genuine freedom of the people and not this bullshit flag worshiping fake version of freedom that America seems to really be, or at least 53% of America seems to be really obsessed with. And then you come to find out that Captain America's kind of he's a dirty socialist, and he just wants good things for the entire country and the world. And you're like, oh shit, Captain America's fucking dope. Um, and so yeah, so they've really taken so many properties that were not hot properties in the mainstream eye, and even amongst comic book readers. I mean, Iron Man wasn't really selling well until they hired Robert Downey Jr. And then all of a sudden, me, even not being a big Iron Man fan, was like, Iron Man's dope. Never mind. And they built a whole fucking franchise around the guy. Same thing with Captain America. When I walked into First Avenger in the movie theater, I remember texting my buddy, and I was like, I hope this doesn't suck. And then I came out and I was like, they managed to make a World War II period piece with comic book characters, and my mind was blown. After that, I remember I think Thor came out not long after that, and I was like, Thor's gonna be dope then, never mind. And since then, with the exception of Thor 2, I've not been disappointed by a single Marvel movie. So they're just, those guys are just, they're unbelievable, man. They really just they know how to fucking just squeeze coal until it's a diamond, man.
Yeah, man. It's and you're right. It Chris Hemsworth and that movie. I say that I didn't like the Thor movies, but I watch them. Like if I'm watching the chronologically, I'll watch them all chronologically sometimes.
Oh yeah.
I'm not going to skip Thor's. I'm not going to skip the Thor movies.
I'll skip Thor 2. I always skip Thor 2. I refuse to ever watch that fucking movie again. I don't care. I don't care how important they decided to make it an Endgame, where they were like, look, we know you assholes hate this movie, but we're going to make this movie a huge part of the ending of this entire saga, whether you fucking like it or not. And in all fairness, that was the first time, the concept of the Infinity Stone was brought. You know what I mean? And so, they were like, fuck you, you're going to, not only are we going to revisit this shitty movie, but we're going to take one of your favorite new weird characters, who's a fucking a bipedal raccoon that talks, and we're going to fucking put him in this movie. We're going to bring back Natalie Portman, and it's one of the best scenes in Endgame. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So they just know what they're fucking doing, man. And even when they don't, they know how to course correct to make you appreciate those things that aren't so great. So I trust in them. I have full faith in them.
Yeah, man, me too. And I guess bringing it back to your story, and you mentioned um, uh, the 53 versus the other percentage of America, and our different views of it, coming from New York, which is very liberal mecca, and then Houston, which I think consider a liberal mecca, but surrounded by not so liberal stuff.
Yeah. It's so funny because there are certain parts of New York that are overall considered liberal, but one thing, eventually I will turn to the point, which is that Houston is actually a much more, I think, liberal and diverse city than New York. One of the things that makes New York a little bit tough is because it is culturally diverse, but because everyone is so on top of each other, and because it was a place where immigrants settled, immigrants tend to settle where other immigrants where other immigrants have gone to that have a similar culture. So a prime example of that is I was never ever exposed to any sort of Mexican culture whatsoever, even though there's a huge population of Mexican folks up north in New York, but they truly stick to their own. I mean, they use their own stores. They don't really venture out unless it's to go to work. And otherwise, they stay in their neighborhoods, they stay in their buildings, and so a lot of areas are like that. You know, Dominicans beef with Puerto Ricans, even though we live in the same buildings. And, you know, there's Italian neighborhoods, there's Jewish neighborhoods, you know, there's Hispanic neighborhoods. Whereas Texas, you know, it's not really, it's so much more, Houston in particular, I should say, not Texas, because Texas is fucking crazy. But Houston, Texas is such a, it's such a melting pot where, you know, with exception of a few areas, you know, you walk down or drive down any given street and you're going to see someone of every fucking type. You know, friendship groups are so much more diverse than they are up in New York because, you know, the Puerto Ricans and the Dominicans tend to hang with each other. The Jamaicans hang with each other, you know, the Italians, they really fucking hang with each other. So, you know, there's a lot of diversity, but there's a lot of cordoning off, which, you know, when you think of the South, you think of segregation, but ironically, here in the Southern diversity cities, there's so much more mixture. And I think part of that is because, especially like Mexican culture is so ingrained into Texas as a whole, but especially so, I think, in Houston or like San Antonio, but specifically to Houston, that having friends that look a little bit different than you is not out of the norm. So it's less of a shock. You know, like for example, growing up, you know, I grew up around a lot of Italians, and you know, you know, if I brought any of my black friends over to my Italian friends' houses that were not from the really, you know, pretty suburbs where there's 4 or 5 bedrooms, you know, their parents would like do that like hide the china look to each other, you know. And here I just don't see it nearly as much. It's so much more diverse and so much more, I'd say, a true melting pot. Whereas New York, you got a bunch of ingredients in the same pot, but there's a little divider between each of them, and there's a little bit of spillover, but it's not. I don't think it's nearly as intertwined as it is here in Houston, which honestly is part of the reason why I fell in love with the city so much. It's an incredible city. The food is amazing. The people are fantastic, and especially, man, the creative community. I'm sure you could speak to this. It is one of the fucking coolest and most down ass communities I have ever met in my entire life, or have ever come across in my entire life. There's just so much love out there. I mean, I've met people, creative folks that, you know, I got more love for, have only known them a year or two, than people I've known my whole fucking life, because they just fucking, I mean, they fucking radiate love and like joy, and they get excited about the things that you're excited about. And there's not, you know, there's a few assholes in the bunch. There's always gonna be, but there, you know, New York's creative scene is fucking competitive. It's trying to, you know, I want to be better than you. And here, you know, you got so many like brands crossing over and working together and promoting each other. And you know, amongst my New York creatives, with a exception of a few of my homies that I know that are just genuinely good people, the art scene is not like that in a lot of cities. And I mean, Houston's just fucking dope as hell, dude. We just have some of the coolest people here. And it's crazy for me to think, as someone who was a born and bred New Yorker that lived there all their lives. But I mean, I tell my wife all the time, she's born and raised here, I don't ever want to fucking leave this city. I love this place. It's amazing. The people are wonderful. And let me tell you, the fucking food is incredible. Now, I miss New York Chinese food, but I'll take Vietnamese, Thai. I'll take that over Chinese food any fucking day, man. Any fucking day.
Hell yeah, hell yeah, yeah, dude. I always promote Houston. I loved Houston.
Yeah.
Still love it. And I come from Indiana, so it's pretty monolithic.
Oh yeah, talk about a culture shock, man. God damn.
Yeah, dude. Indiana might as well be the South. It's so conservative. And
yeah, for sure, for sure.
And when I saw how diverse Houston was, it was just like this weird sense of comfort. And
yeah,
I never realized how tense I was in Indiana. Just the way they operated, and it's just the way it's built. It's just a structure of separation, and so
yeah.
seeing people from Houston operate like that, and was definitely beautiful. I think it's taken over. It's going to be bigger than Chicago as
Oh, absolutely.
pretty soon.
There's no
Yeah.
question about it, man. And like here, you can be the complete and utter fucking weirdo you want to be, and like not only are people not going to judge you, but they're like, I like you, weirdo, come hang with us weirdos, you know what I mean? And I mean, it's just, I look at my group of friends and you know, family members that I've collected along the 10 years, and they're just, they're the craziest fucking mix of people, and you would think they would never get along together, and you put them in a room together and it's like they've known each other all their fucking lives. And I think a lot of folks here are really like that. Outside of Houston, that's tricky. You know, that's where you pull out the fucking Trump flags and the blue line and all that fucking garbage. But but Houston is just so fucking dope, man. It's such an amazing city with incredible people, and the creative scene. Really, I can't speak highly enough about it. It's unbelievable. Some of the most genuine, warm, and just off the wall creative people that I've ever met in my entire life are all right here, and ironically not in New York. Oh, I can't hear you, Josh.
Oh, my bad.
You're good. You're good.
Yeah. Yeah. I was saying I really love Houston, and definitely agreed. So how did you end up over there?
So my sister, the Marine that I mentioned, she signed up for the Marines when she was 17, right after her 18th birthday, on a bus to Paris Island. She eventually got out and was just reserve, got reactivated after 9/11 and was shipped off to New Orleans. And so she met a dude who was from Houston, so she ended up moving here when she was done with her reactivation. And you know, she had been for years since she moved to the South. She was like, I don't know why you're fucking staying up in New York. It's so expensive. It's impossible to live up there. And you know, she lives about an hour north of Houston, out in Tomball. And you know, I was like, I'm not gonna, especially, you know, 10 or 11 years ago, I was like, I'm not gonna fucking move out there. There's nothing out there. Like, got one supermarket 20 minutes away. Like, I was like, fuck no, man. And you know, and then, you know, as time went on, you know, it kind of got a little more built out up there. And the company I was working for at the time, they had to basically, they had to lay off everyone who had been there for less than 10 years.
Mhm.
And so they were like, look, you know, you're great at your job, but unfortunately, you got to cut everybody who isn't about to retire. So you know, my sister, I happened to be here for Thanksgiving, and you know, she's trying to convince me, and I'm like, fuck that, dude. I'm not moving to the fucking South. I'm a New Yorker for life, you know, and all that bullshit. And then she, you know, she's on her laptop and she goes, why don't you take a look at how cheap rent is here? And I looked, and it was like $500 for a fucking apartment. And I was like,
Yo.
bro, that's a third of what I pay for a shitty apartment in a shitty fucking neighborhood. I was like, this place has a pool. And that was, you know, she finally figured out that the way to get me here was was to 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 take advantage of how fucking cheap I am. So so you know, I came back, and you know, I was hemming and hawing about it for a couple of days, and I said, you know what, fuck it, I'm gonna pack all my shit up into my little Honda Civic, and I'm gonna bounce and see what happens. Worst case scenario, you know, at the time my parents still lived there, so I was like, if I fucking hate it, I'll come back. I'll start over. I got plenty of connections up here. And then you know, at the time, especially, she was pregnant with my nephew, who's basically like my little clone. He's into all the things that I'm into. We have the exact same personality. He's a sneaky little motherfucker like I was when I was his age. Um, you know, so she was pregnant with him. So I came down to give her a hand, and just kind of help her out. And so I was like her living, you know, butler. I would, you know, cook all the meals for her, go food shopping for her, and take care of the house while I was looking for a job and stuff. in lieu of rent because I didn't have a job at the time. But then I was lucky enough, actually, about 5 or 6 months after I was really exhausted with looking for a job. I happened to call my old boss and I was like, "Hey, we got anything in Houston?" He was like, "I was just talking about you not 2 hours ago." He's
Wow.
like, "We got something in Houston if you wanna." He's like, "We'll reinstate you tomorrow." Blah blah blah. So I'm obviously no longer with them, but you know, it was cool to kind of have something to help me, kind of get back on my feet. But yeah, I just once I moved out of Tomball, I really fell in love with Texas and Houston. It just I was there for a couple of years, and I couldn't fucking take it. And then I remember to kind of tie it all back to the like how liberal New York is supposedly, and how conservative Texas can be. It was during Obama's reelection in 2012, and I remember, when I was younger, I was one of those people who, and I think that was probably like a lot of folks, because I don't think a lot of people really understood what modern conservatism had evolved into, or maybe devolved into. And so I was like, oh well, I mean, it's both sides of the coin. I get it. They want to be more fiscally responsible, which is just a fucking ruse for stealing money from poor people and giving it away to the rich. But anyway, um, I remember this is when I was like, it was like a fucking light switch, and I was going to do something with my license. I don't remember what it was, and there were just these like angry fucking white dudes outside of the DPS, like trying to get people to vote against Obama. And like, I mean, they were like internet trolls come to life. And it was the first time I'd really seen that. In the Trump years, it was like they all just became fucking, they all became caricatures of themselves. But back then, it was still a little bit kind of new, and they had a fucking like Obama doll hanging by a noose. They were selling stickers that said "Don't renege," and I was like, I remember
Oh
I
my
saw
god.
this, and I was like, especially when you grow up in New York, you've never been, you're exposed to like, not to downplay racism, but you're exposed to like casual like racism that maybe when you're younger you don't realize is actually insanely fucking toxic. And honestly, in my opinion, kind of worse than overt racism, because at least if you're overtly racist, I know where you stand. And I remember that was when I was like, oh, never mind. Like, there, fuck the two sides coin. One side is out to effectively commit genocide on everyone who doesn't look like them. And while the other side may not be perfect all the time, the intention is good, and I'll take that over anything. So, my friends always joke that like I'm the first person to move to a conservative state and go full blown like you know I mean I hate the term liberal, because liberals are fucking bullshit artists. They're just
Yeah.
conservatives that like wave rainbow flags occasionally, but don't actually care about real progress and real structural change. But
Hmm.
I went from being like kind of middle of the road to all the way fucking full blown. I fully support socialism. I fully support like the workers owning the means of production and tearing down this fucking garbage system that we currently have.
Yeah.
And so I just, they always crack on me for moving to one of the most conservative states. And I was like, look, the reason why is because before it was an idea, it was a concept that I thought was not, was ethereal to me. And seeing it like up close and personal, and seeing the hate in these people's eyes, and it really just, it hit my fucking soul, man. And like, I think it just really, I've always been, anti scummy government, but it really just kind of pushed me over to the edge where I was like, nah, man, like these people are, it's not a lot about political ideas. It's about pure hatred for things that they don't understand. And that really broke me. But in a good way. You know what I mean? I
Hmm.
think it really informed the the person that I've now become, 8 or 10 years later.
Oh, that's really cool. I mean, Houston in and of itself, like we said earlier, it is very, I guess I'll use the word liberal right now.
Yeah,
But like, yeah, outside Tomball is definitely getting close to where like that, if not there, that's where it starts getting
yeah.
pretty scary.
2014 to 2016 was gnarly, man, because
I
that
can
was
imagine.
like the and then once Trump became president, that place turned into just the most insane and grossly uninformed community that I've ever seen in my entire life. And they just fucking doubled down on the hatred, You've got, people rolling around with bumper stickers that say like, "I've got your six." What why do you need to have a cop's back? What, like, they're armed. They have the full force of the law behind them.
Yeah,
So what you really mean is, I also don't like black people. That's what you're really saying with these blue
yeah,
line flags and these "I've got your stick" bumper stickers. You're outright saying it. Yeah, me too. And I'm
yeah,
happy to defend you rather than the innocent fucking person that you're murdering in the street like a fucking animal for having an unpaid parking ticket or for committing contempt of cop because you've got the ego of a little boy and you don't know how to fucking regulate your emotions when someone who looks different than you talks to you without being like, "Yes sir, no sir." So that, man, that's one of those things that, like, once 2014 hit, I was like, I gotta get the fuck out of this place, man. Like, I can't live here. And I don't present as Hispanic.
uh,
I'm relatively light skinned, except for the summertime when my Puerto Rican comes out and I get super duper dark. But because it's one of those towns where a lot of folks there, they've got Germanic heritage, and so everybody kind of looks the same. And I would get these looks like I was a fucking alien when I'd go to Chick-fil-A, and I'm like, I don't even look that different from you assholes. Like, so that's how closed off they are, that anyone who deviates from the norm is an outsider. You know what I mean? So, I mean, I had a gun pulled on me for walking around my neighborhood
oh my
at 8
gosh.
o'clock at night because the guy was like, "You don't look like you belong here." And I was like, "Homie, I have a fucking mortgage down the street. Like, what the fuck are you
Jeez.
talking about, man?" So it's just, I joke all the time. Like, I used to hang out, my 20s, you know, any given Saturday night, I'd be in, the Bronx or Harlem or wherever. Never once had a gun pulled on me. In the first 2 years that I lived in Tomball, I had a gun pulled on me 6 times, all by white guys in shiny polo shirts and $60,000 F-250s going home to their fucking kids, because those are the actual dangerous people. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? Like, and it just, so much of that really just opened up my mind to how, like, just fucked up, like, people can really be in some of those really kind of cordoned off neighborhoods. And because of that, I couldn't stand to make excuses for people who believe that kind of shit. I have a couple of friends that I tell them all the time. I'm like, I only argue with you because I think you're salvageable. I know you're smart enough and you have a good heart. You just got too many stupid friends, and I'm gonna hammer you down with these facts until one day it finally fucking clicks for you. You know what I mean? But yeah, I think the last 4 years have really just fucked up a lot of people.
Yeah, dude, and and I could go on for. I feel like I can go on about this all day, and I actually, now that I think of it, I arrived in Houston in 2015,
Okay.
and as a sales rep in the construction industry, you're
Oh boy.
yeah, man. So you're interacting with a lot of like either higher middle, or wealthy white
Yeah.
men, and
Hmm.
this shit comes up all the time. The owner of the first company that I worked for, I didn't realize, huge Trump supporter. My
Yeah.
manager my all of my managers since I moved to Texas were Trump supporters, and
Yeah.
luckily I was able to leave the industry. But
Yeah, it's crazy when you realize that like these kinds of people have the power. And look, if genuinely, if in your heart you have conservative values, actual conservative values, where you're about supporting families and tight knit communities and taking care of each other, plot twist, that's called socialism. Like, but they don't realize it. You know what I
yeah,
mean? Because to them, it's like, no, I only want to take care of my own, but we're all each other's own in America. Like, we all got to
yeah,
take care of each other. And those of us who have a little bit of privilege or have a lot of bit of privilege, we need to fucking step up and replace those assholes and and help build other people up so that it's not, and I'm not saying like get rid of all of them, because some of them I think are just a lot of them are just misguided. They don't
yeah.
understand. They've never. Now a good chunk are just plain fucking hateful. And I think the last 4 years, anyone still on the Trump train is just a piece of shit. I don't. I know that's painting with a very wide brush, but if you can apologize and make excuses for all of the last 4 years, I want, my few friends that I still had faith in, they were like, maybe I fucked up. Maybe I just really, really hated Hillary and I didn't actually know it was a bad idea to elect a fucking, mentally deranged game show host. But, otherwise, man, I mean, fuck those people at this point. I could care less. And I've had people be like, oh, well, I've had people reach out, especially when I started making more political stuff. People were like, well, just make cool stuff. And I'm like, I am making cool shit because, you like my art, but my personality, my belief, and my worldview, that that shapes my art. So my appreciation for all of these things, like geek culture and hip hop, all of those things are all about inclusivity, about telling stories of the little guy trying to make it in a fucked up world, um, and telling their story so that you can understand it. And just because it's not overtly political, that doesn't mean that all of those things aren't still tied. So yes, I fucking believe Black Lives Matter because I'm not a fucking asshole. I'm not an egotistical monster who thinks that everyone shouldn't have an actual genuine equal opportunity and not this fake version of that we pretend to have.
Yeah, man. It's like just because like they think if Black lives actually matter, then they're gonna matter less. It's like no, you want like we
Yeah.
all. It's all. It's like you said, we're all people of the same human race,
Yeah.
and so and what's cool, I love your stuff because you especially the stuff that you put those messaging in. And art is such a powerful tool for getting communicating these messages, and hopefully making that one piece to make that little change to someone who caught their eye, and finally it something clicks, and then they get this whole entire new worldview. So when did you decide to start practicing, and how did you learn art in that sense?
Um, I mean, I always, as a kid, I drew all the time. And then, as you get older and you become a teenager, you're a fucking moron and you start to leave things that you love because you're like, oh, I'm too old for this. But I had always still like doodled. I love being creative. If I wasn't drawing, in my kind of spare time, I would, make something, or, I would go out and build something out of wood or whatever. And actually, about 4-ish years ago, when I met a very good friend of mine, probably one of my best friends, who's also an artist, my buddy Lofton, he goes by Big Liff on Instagram. I would always see him drawing, and we would talk about art. And he's like, he's like, do you draw? He's like, you're always like talking about. And I was like, I draw occasionally, and and so he kind of like I really give him a lot of credit for like re-sparking my interest. And he was my first like he was my first the first time I like dipped my toes into like the Houston art scene. And and then I started drawing stuff, and he introduced me to some other folks. And then I got to see how more and more people in the Houston and art stuff. And I basically just, once I started drawing again, what really kicked it off, it was like serendipitous. The universe is always, it's always trying to guide you to what you to things that make you happy. And it's kind of up to you to like either go with the flow and just let her take you where she wants to take you, or fight it. And my wife had just gotten an iPad, and she was like, I'm going to try the Apple Pencil and see how it is. And before I knew it, I kept stealing the iPad, and I was drawing stuff, and she was like, do you think maybe I could use my brand new toy that I just bought? And I was like, oh yeah, yeah, yeah. And then finally I was like, you know what? I think I'm gonna get myself like an iPad Pro. And once I had that, and I had kind of the ability to draw anywhere I wanted to, and also fix my mistakes, because I'm a serial perfectionist. And because of that, nothing is ever perfect. So digital medium really just kind of hit me, because you can fix, you can alter, you can replace. Um, and then uh, I'd say my first real like love with digital art is so I went to a trade school in New York, and at the time it was I started high school in '97, and at the time they had all kinds of stuff. They had like a mechanic program, carpentry program, fashion, hair design. It's one of the best schools in New York, and their other one was printing. And I was like, well, this is interesting. Like I'd like to learn how, newspapers are created. And so, the first year we were there, when we were first introduced to it, it was, like old school printing presses. And we were, creating images and then transferring them to metal transfer plates and putting them on the press and learning how to use the ink. And then, um, it was kind of right when I don't know if you remember the different color iMacs that first came out, the like round bubbly ones
Yeah.
that were like translucent. Yeah, I think every '90s and '80s kid remembers those. And those were kind of really popularized at the time, and they had just started to get a little bit better, and like Photoshop had kind of like come into the ether. And because it was such a great school with a really interesting program, they were a little looser with the budget. So I'm in my major for about maybe 6-7 months, about a year, and all of a sudden we get a shipment of a whole bunch of Apple computers and like a Photoshop key. And my teacher, who was this like old school, just like New York dude, who was like, he had no idea how fucking computers worked. He had zero understanding of this stuff. And they'd come in, and he was like, does anybody know how to do this stuff? And even though we grew up really poor, I got my first job at 10 years old because I wanted a computer, because I was obsessed with computers. And so we fucking financed the computer under my name. Like my parents were like, oh no, you're gonna pay this shit every fucking month. And it was like fucking $3,000 for like a gateway computer that was like a 386. And a month or two later, I was like buying parts for it and ripping it apart and Frankensteining it and adding this. And anyway, so I had always kind of had a good handle on technology. So I was like, hey, I know what I'm doing, so I helped him set stuff up. And kind of before you knew it, uh, he was like, look, I'm going to retire in a year or two. I don't know anything about this shit. You kind of know what you're doing. So unofficially, I would basically kind of like teach the class how to do stuff. And I
Wow.
basically kind of like ran not, I mean, when I say like ran, I say that I use that term very loosely, but, like, I was, I was finding like Adobe Photoshop plugins, and teaching people how to use different stuff, and all kinds of stuff like that. When it was time to like choose a digital printer, he trusted me to like get this fucking giant machine, because it was 1998. But it was like a color laser printer that could like collate and staple, and it was like back then it was like the craziest thing ever. And it was the size of like a fucking Honda Civic. It was huge. But so digital art had always been really, really cool to me. And I used to anything creative with stuff. I used to, me and my buddies were all in like shitty hardcore bands and stuff, and I use the term band very fucking loosely. But I would like make album covers for people, or I would like do creative stuff with like people's pictures and Photoshop and stuff. And I was, I saved up all my money, and I was one of the first people to get like a digital camera. So, I was the guy who like you called if you needed a picture for like your AOL profile, or your MySpace. You know what I mean? So I learned HTML so I could, alter my MySpace profile, and like, all this kind of like goofy shit now that's so silly. But digital art really just like that ability to create something and then alter it just blew my fucking mind. Because with drawing or building something, when you fuck up, you fuck up. There's no back button. There's no delete this layer and start over. So digital really, really, I just love that medium because I can turn it into anything. I can turn it into a shirt. I can turn it into a print. I can turn it into a hat. And I'm a big t-shirt. I love clothing. I love sneakers. And so I love wearable art. So once I figured out that that was kind of my sweet spot, where I just wanted to make cool shirts that I would want to wear. That was kind of where I was like, okay, this is what I want to do, and I'm very lucky. Like, I'm really, really bad at advertising myself. Like, I just, I'm just fucking horrible at it. And I'm very lucky that like, this is a fun side gig for me. So, I just, I have the creative freedom to just make shit that I want to make without any pressure. Um, you know, um, and so I just, I'll be like, oh, this would be a cool shirt. I'm gonna draw this now, and I'll just draw it and turn it into a shirt. And if nobody buys it, it sucks. I get it, but like, I got a cool shirt out of it. I get to, people will compliment me and be like, hey, that's a cool shirt. And, my wife always like hits me, and she would like, he made it. Cause I'll even forget to tell people that like, you can buy this shirt, like I'm just so bad at it.
Yeah.
And it's not out of like, it's not cause I'm like, like super humble or anything. I just kind of, I just make it to create it and put it out in the world. And if people dig it, they dig it. So that's definitely something. One of my 2021 goals is to be better at pushing my stuff out there. And COVID really, I was just kind of starting to get the hang of things. And right when I figured out like, okay, this is your sweet spot, that's when markets shut down and I could no longer do markets. So COVID really, I think for like most of us, really kind of set me back. But now that things are opening back up, I'm going to start doing more markets and really getting out there. Because, I know I'm way more inclined to purchase something cool if I'm out and about and having a good time than if I'm just browsing online. Because when you're online, there's a million and one things you could purchase. You know what I mean? And I know at least my buying habits, and I think most nerds and people who are kind of into the stuff that I'm into, there's that impulse buy, like there's that like serotonin hit where you're like,
Yeah.
"Ooh, I got a new shiny," you know what I mean? Like, so that's definitely something that I want to be better about. But at the same time, I also like the freedom to just like, because it's not something that I eat off of. I can just fucking post a bunch of information about shit going on in the world, and use my platform for that. So it really, I'm very lucky that it gets to be something that like I can just do whatever the fuck I want to do with it. I'm not beholden to a brand identity, or any of that kind of stuff. And brand identities work, you know what I mean? And for folks who are creating a brand, that's incredible, you know what I mean? For me, I just like to consider myself an artist who makes stuff for people to wear if they want to. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, dude.
it's the worst way to describe a brand, but I don't like to consider what I do a brand. One day I would actually like to spin it off into a proper brand with an identity and something that I'm into, but I still want to continue to just make goofy shit that I like. If I'm watching an old school Ninja Turtles cartoon, I'm like, I'm gonna turn that into a Wu Tang W. I'm just gonna make it, and if people fuck with it, they fuck with it, and if they don't, they don't. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
I definitely enjoy that kind of creative freedom.
Yeah, dude. And it's like I mean, nowadays each person on Instagram is kind of a brand. So I mean, to me,
Yeah.
you kind of do have like a brand. So anyway, and like if I'm scrolling and I don't if I'm scrolling too fast to see your name and I see something,
Yeah.
if it's yours, I definitely know it's yours, and I'm like, oh, and then I'll stop. I'm like, okay, that's
Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
I
yeah,
appreciate that,
yeah.
man. I appreciate that. I appreciate it. I guess I never really thought about like not really considering myself a brand as I guess in and of itself a brand identity. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
I like so many different things, and so I don't ever like to be beholden to that. You know, like in like my music taste is probably a prime example of that. If you were to put on my shuffle, you might hear anything from Wu Tang to Slayer to Kesha to fucking Bobby Womack to the Temptations. You know, like, and I like so much shit that some days I feel like wearing like a hoodie and some Jordans and like a fitted. And some days I feel like wearing some like nice fitted jeans and a button down and some like clean boots, like
yeah.
and I love that I can just kind of fucking make whatever for whatever I'm in the mood for. And I think the people that I like the most I've noticed tend to be kind of that way too, where they're just like, I'm just gonna enjoy whatever I want to enjoy, and I don't want to be beholden to any one particular thing.
Heck yeah, man. No, definitely. I'm kind of the same way. And you know what's I messed up. I love black graphic tees, and I
Yeah.
messed up. I have yours in my closet, and I should have worn that one. Anyway.
It's all good, man. I mean, I did the brand hoarding for myself, so don't worry about it.
No, dude, I love your stuff.
Thank you, man. I really appreciate that.
Heck yeah, dude. So what's so you said that this is a side hustle. What's your main gig?
Um, I try not to talk about that too much publicly. I'm happy to let you know on the
Oh, you don't
side.
have to if you don't want
Uh,
to. Yeah, 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 yeah,
but because I have very strong political opinions and
yeah. I got you.
and I like a true Gemini, I love to tell people all about myself, but then I'm like, no, I don't want you to know anything about me. You know what I mean? So
Yeah, yeah.
I'm happy to tell you offline, but
Yeah, yeah,
I'm always, I'm always, I'm always hesitant to kind of talk about that stuff public. I don't put any of that kind of stuff on my Facebook, and even though that's all friends that I actually know, and I'm happy to have conversations with them
sure.
about stuff, and I'm never, but I try not to ever put it out there just because, I'm a loudmouth. I talk a lot of shit. I don't hold back on my political opinions, and not all employers love that kind of
Yeah, man.
stuff.
Yeah. I totally get that. That's why I didn't really show my face a lot on my page
Yeah,
before I was like, okay, I'm gonna quit soon." Um,
yeah. Yeah,
so
same, man. I don't really tend to post a whole lot. If it is, it's like a story and it's gone in 24 hours. And in fact, not so long ago, I wiped my Instagram of most of my stuff. Just so, and again, not that I'm afraid to show who I am, but
mhm,
you know, my my income source doesn't need to know fuck all about what I do when I'm,
yeah,
after that 8 hours is done,
it's none of their
you don't
business.
own me. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah.
you know?
Yeah, I got you. I got you. So, so do you print all of your stuff yourself, or
So no, because I'm so small time, I use a drop shipper.
yeah?
I do plan on, now that I'm going to be doing markets and stuff. I do want to start using like local printers and stuff and that, and just kind of grow grow the business aspect of it, I guess. I would like to eventually, once I have the space, I do actually want to either invest in like a DTG machine, and just print my own stuff. But that's a $10,000 investment, and that's just kind of on the low end to start. And
Yeah.
as small time as I am, and as bad as I am at whoring myself out, um, I know that it would just fucking sit here, and I would just end up printing shirts for myself more often than anything else. And I can't see myself putting that kind of money in, but I think once I grow it, I definitely do want to invest in more and have more creative control over everything and not be beholden to anyone else and just do my own thing and print crazy shit and put it in unusual spots on the shirt. And one thing that I would like to actually eventually teach myself how to do is like actually sewing and building pieces of clothing.
Mm.
I really, really love that like tactile feeling of creating something that belongs in your hands that you can wear. I enjoy the occasional cosplay. I'm not nearly on the level of some folks, but the couple of times that I've done it, I really love creating things and taking garments and altering them, and that's something that I would like to eventually teach myself how to do as well, and actually create clothing rather than create art that goes on clothing, and kind of that be the art, and make like custom pieces or stuff like that.
Hell yeah, man. That I actually aspire to do the same one day
Oh,
because
really?
yeah, I thought it would be cool just to make your own custom piece instead of like having it print. So that's not. I don't want to like learn to sew. Maybe someone else sew it for me. That'd be dope. um,
I like it. I like it. I like it.
no, but this is just this is actually just a selfish question. Which drop shipper do you use? Because you got the one I got was heat transfer vinyl, right?
It's DTG, so it's direct to garment printing
Really?
right off the printing machines. Yeah, it's really really high quality. I before I decided to sell anything, I did a lot of like trial and error with like checking out different drop shippers, and I had reached out to some places, and so I got a lot of bad shirts that are samples where the shirts look like shit, the print looks like shit. And I finally settled on one where the quality is always really, really consistent. I've washed shirts 10 tens of times, 20, 30 times, and the print holds up really, really well. So I'm glad that other people notice that kind of stuff because I'm a big t-shirt nerd. I don't like those like shitty box. I hate when like I order something dope online and it photographs really well, and then I get it and it's some like Gildan piece of shit with terrible sleeves, and
Yeah.
it's made in Bangladesh, which nothing against the companies that make their stuff outside of the states, but the quality control is a little bit different, and so like all of my shirts, with exception of the big and tall stuff, I'm trying to figure out a way to make the big and tall stuff American made as well, but everything from extra small to 3X is all American made, printed in the States. Because I really do like, and not in a xenophobic way, but I genuinely do believe in like American ingenuity and like keeping the dollars within our economy so that we grow, because so many of these fucking companies, they outsource everything to other countries. You've got quote American brands that are getting sneakers made for 75 cents to a dollar, and then they're flipping them for $180 a piece, you know what I mean? So I've had people be like, oh well, your shirts are a little too expensive, which one, suck my dick. Like, they're high quality, they're made in America, and I'm not going to sell garbage. But ironically, those same people will buy a $40 shirt from, fucking Paper Planes or some other brand that's owned by some rich asshole that probably doesn't, pay their people a whole lot of money. But then, something made by an actual artist that only costs $30, they'll scoff at that, but toss their money at, super expensive shit because it's a name brand. So, um, I put a lot of thought and stuff into the quality of the shirts, the cut of the shirts, the print, how everything looks. I don't put anything on my website until I have a sample in hand and I'm looking at it and I'm analyzing every little detail, and I'll nitpick it to death and be like, I don't love the way this color looks. I'm going to order another sample. Or you know what? I should have placed it a little bit lower. Let me place the design a little bit lower, order another sample, and see what we have. My first shirt, the Venom Wu Tang one with the kind of like drippy honey and the tongue hanging out, I've got like fucking 7 of those shirts,
Wow.
of all different kinds because I wanted to really just make it right,
That's awesome.
because I hate that feeling of spending my hard-earned money on a cool nerd shirt, especially nerd shirts. They're really piss poor quality because an old trope of nerds is that we don't give a shit about fashion. We don't care how stuff looks, and for the small minority of the older nerds who do care about that kind of stuff, and then these younger cats who do actually care how they look, and nerd culture is fashionable now. I don't ever want somebody to open up a package with my name on it and feel like they got ripped off. I want them to be like, holy shit, I can't believe I paid this little for this such high quality shirt. Because you compare some of the shirts that I have to even some of the name brand shirts. After 6 or 7 hours of wearing a t-shirt, it does that thing where it blouses out and you can see all the little wrinkles, or you sit down in your car after putting on a fresh t-shirt and it looks like shit and it looks wrinkled all day long, or the sleeves are boxy or whatever. So like I said, there was a whole lot of R&D on my first couple of shirts, and even now, if I try out a color for the first time, I might order 2 or 3 different versions just to make sure that it's just right.
That's really awesome, man. And it shows because I got it and I was like, because I do the same thing for my site. I do a drop ship, but I recently noticed it started washing off my shit. So I
Yeah.
was like, I gotta find a
What do you
different
use
printer.
for dropshipper?
Printable, just kind of like one of the big
Yeah,
it
see, that's who I use, and their stuff is
really.
always really, really high quality. Yeah, it may honestly be the shirt types because I've noticed some of the earlier shirts that put out, the print did not wear, and like I was joking around with my wife the other day. I was like, now that I found the formula, I almost want to like send new versions of my shirts to the first like 5 people who bought them, who supported me. Be like, yo, look, you helped inform how I do things 2 years later, and it's still something I'm considering. I might just send a couple of people just randomly new versions of the shirts and be like, here you go, enjoy.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, Printful, they're really good. I find that for like small time, it really
Yeah.
does work. Their prices are relatively fair. And if they fuck up, they'll send you a replacement in no time.
Okay.
They're you just got to stay on their asses. If you see that like you get a print that's like slightly off, send them a quick email, and within a few hours they'll typically answer. Send them a couple of photos, and within about a week you'll have a new version of whatever that shirt is.
Okay.
And then they'll typically get it right from then on out.
Nice. Okay. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Because this one, yeah. Anyway, yours is on point. Super. Like it's got a nice glossy finish, and I've worn it a bunch of times too. And it's like
Which
really,
uh which one do you have again?
the fuck ice one.
Oh yes. Oh, I fucking love that shirt so much, dude.
Yeah.
It that design really throws people off because they don't like people who get it spot it right away.
Yeah.
And then people who don't, which are typically the conservatives, they'll look and then you could see like it takes them a second because they're usually a little stupid. And all of a sudden they'll just like they'll look and they'll have like a look of like curiosity, and then they'll go and there's like an immediate scowl,
Uh huh.
and it's honestly, I enjoy that more than when people are like, "Yo, that's a dope shirt," because I've hit that fucking idiot right in the heart, and they don't know how to take it. When part of the reason why I tend to make like if I'm gonna make a political statement with my art, I try for it to be really fucking in your face because that that side really they think they've got the like it's very strange. They've got like they're I don't think they really know like they don't seem to really understand who they are, but they think that they're like good wholesome people. But then they also seem to think that like they have the monopoly on like verbal violence, that they have the monopoly on like the fuck you, I don't care about, how you think. And they don't realize that we feel the exact same way. And a lot of a lot of, at least up until the last recent years, I've noticed in the last few years, I've noticed a lot of artists have just fucking had it up to here. But social change messages in art, at least on like t-shirts and stuff, used to be a little bit, it's usually like the love everyone or this or that. And I believe in loving everyone, but I also believe that like there are just some people you can't change, and those people can go fuck themselves. So
Mm-hmm.
like, that's why I made that fuck ICE design, because I don't give a fuck about what you think police are, what you think ICE does. Police as a whole, they're corrupt. There's some good apples. I have a few family members and one or two friends. I used to have a lot more friends that were cops, but they turned into, or they showed themselves to be racist pieces of shit. So I removed them from their life, because that's what you do with fucking cancer. You rip it out. Um, but I have a few, friends and family that are good cops, that are the example that all cops should be. But unfortunately, the majority, from the ground up, the system is insanely corrupt. So there might be a small handful of good cops. And it's hard as someone who believes, that like all cops are bastards. I don't believe that my friends and family are bastards, but I believe that the position, the systemic job of a police officer is to protect the property of the rich, to oppress the poor, and to punish the poor. And
Mm-hmm.
until we figure those things out, you might not be a bastard, but all cops are still bastards. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And some of my favorite family members are cops, and they're wonderful, good-hearted, loving people who do genuinely believe in the job they're doing every day. And they're legit heroes. I have family members that have fucking thrown off all their gear in the middle of a fucking shift to jump into a fucking river to stop someone from committing suicide.
Wow.
I have, one of my cousins is he's ESU in the NYPD, and he's the guy you send in when you have a real fucking problem, or he's one of the guys you send in. And I have, friends that are part of, ESU kind of units as well, and they're incredible people. And they, a lot of them do believe that most cops are bitches. I mean, unfortunately, that is the case. It's a job that now, it used to be a little bit more of a calling, and I think now it's a way to guarantee employment with good pay. And they'll bitch and moan and pretend to cry that they're underpaid, but that's only their base salaries. When you look at their overtime and all the benefits that they get, and that they're paid, a lot of them are paid to get injured. So when they go into the hospital or they go to the ER for some kind of injury they get on the job, they get paid hundreds of dollars for just walking through the door. There's a lot of scamming going on in police departments.
Mm-hmm.
But all that to say, like, fuck ICE, fuck Border Patrol, fuck every
Yeah.
last one of them. Especially more so, I think ICE and Border Patrol, because there is just a culture of like pure violence and hatred, and they quite literally see people that are just trying to make a better life for themselves and their family as enemies. And they talk about wanting to kill these people and lock them up for the rest of their lives. And I cannot, as what I hope to be a good person, be okay with turning a blind eye to that kind of violence and corruption and just plain evil. I mean, there's no better way to say it. Like, I'm all for having a really well structured, immigration process, because I have family members that try to come over here and do the right thing, and they spent 10, 15, $20,000 only to be denied and to be sent home. So like, I get why you're going to sneak across the border instead, because you can bitch and moan about, oh well, if you don't do it the right way, you don't deserve it. Well, fuck you, because people who do it the right way don't get to do it either. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
the system is corrupt from top to bottom. So, fuck all those assholes. I don't wish any bad on people, but if they happen to like spontaneously combust or get hit by a car someday. Oh well, sucks to suck. Like karma's a bitch, and the universe is trying to tell you that you're a piece of garbage. You
Yeah,
know what I mean?
man. Yeah, man. We act like we steal the wealth from the rest of the world and then try to create a moat around the kingdom that we've built, and people get mad
Yeah,
when you make it across, you know?
yeah. It's really like this country was. It's built on stolen land, built by stolen labor, and for some reason people still want to protect the kingdom. You know, they
Mhm.
still want to protect the man in the ivory tower because, you know, our system, our insanely aggressive capitalistic system has like it's just convinced people that like you should just always be shitting on the little guy and one day you might be rich. But that's a fucking bullshit. That's never
Mhm.
the American dream is a fucking lie. You know what I mean? Like the odds of anyone being that successful are slim to none. And if you know, it's like the old bootstraps adage, you know, you can
Mhm.
say pull yourself up by your bootstraps when you got a pair of brand new Timberlands. But, you know, when you got fourth generation hand me downs where the soles are worn out, the laces are ripped to shreds. You can't pull yourself up. And then the guy below you, he doesn't even fucking have boots. You know what I mean? So, you know, it really is just I adore this country. I really, really do.
Yeah.
And, you know, I know that a lot of people especially on the conservative end of things, tend to be like, well, you know, you know, love it or leave it, and like I, I, I criticize my country because I fucking love my country because I know at the end of the day, if we actually did the things that we say we're about, we could be a genuine shining beacon of freedom, of hope, of prosperity, and that's just not the fucking case. Like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? You can wave around the stars and stripes all you want, but you know, that flag was built on blood. And until we genuinely come to terms with that and really understand our history and understand how this and be honest about this country's history, I think it's the only way we'll ever genuinely be prosperous for all, not just for like 20 assholes on yachts, you know. And I think for all the shit that people, Americans especially, like to talk about Canada, no country is perfect, but Canada owns up to its mistakes. You know, they acknowledge the way that they treated indigenous people. You know, while they don't have the complicated history of slavery that we do, you know, at the end of the day, all colonized nations fucked over someone to
Mhm.
varying degrees, but they all fucked someone over. And you know that honesty and that togetherness, I think, is why you know Canada takes really good care of its people and their politicians, even when they're not perfect, tend to be a lot more genuine than the folks we have here. That's not to say that some of them aren't problematic, you know, that some of them don't still say and do some real bonehead bullshit, but a lot of them genuinely do care about helping other people because they're raised in an environment where it's encouraged to be kind to people and be considerate of their thoughts and try to understand people from where they're coming from. And America, it's like, you know, we've done a lot of great things because we're so individualistic, but along the way, we've left a lot of destruction in the wake of that quote progress and not progressed in a lot of areas. And you know, I would rather have a happy, healthy, well-fed, and educated populace than like buy a new iPhone every year. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Like that's it's dope. Don't get me wrong. I love that I can buy fucking sneakers whenever I want to and have all the choices in the world. But, you know, at the end of the day, I'd give all of that up if it meant that everybody was fucking happy and prosperous. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
I also don't believe you have to give those things up. You know, part of the illusion of capitalism is that people are like, well, I want freedom to make my own choices. But we don't actually make any of these choices because, you know, products make it to market because they were approved because this politician knows that lawmaker and that lawmaker is on the board of this company, and this company makes the plastics that do this, and so the illusion of freedom, that can suck my dick. I'd prefer actual, real, genuine freedom. You know what I mean? If it means
Yeah.
that everyone is genuinely prosperous. People. There's always going to be people who want to slack. There's always going to be people who want to hustle. But I don't think your survival needs to be dependent on how much money you make, on what your career choice is. There's always that thing of like, oh, people are going to abuse welfare. People abuse every system,
Yeah.
but that fraction of a fraction of a fraction of percentage of people who abuse it,
Yeah.
like, they're going to abuse any system. So they bringing them up as an excuse to just never do anything about it is one of the laziest and stupidest things I personally believe that you can do. Like, and if we believed in more socialist values, like paying people fair wages, covering their health insurance, making sure that nobody goes hungry, you wouldn't have welfare to abuse.
Right.
Like, you would, you know what I mean? So
Right,
it
man.
it's it's one of those just crazy things that, like, it just, at the end of the day, if everybody was well taken care of, we wouldn't have these problems, and you wouldn't your entire belief structure would cease to exist, because we wouldn't have those issues anymore, which means it wouldn't be a political stance.
Yeah, man. It's kind of like, I mean, in short, we criticize I love America too, but we
Yeah.
criticize it because it can be better. Like,
Yeah,
that's all. We
absolutely.
can do
Absolutely.
better. Like, other
Yeah.
we can't do better unless we make some constructive criticisms, and that's what we're doing here.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I don't think, it's like America needs to be in therapy. Like,
Mhm.
America needs to sit down with someone and just spill the fucking beans, and then have that person go, okay, now that's fucked up. Let's fix it. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And, it seems like, unfortunately, a lot of our fellow Americans don't don't want to. And I get it. It's one of those things, like, it's tough to come to grips with the fact that, like, you might not be the great person you think you are, and you might have some things that you believe in that are stupid and problematic as fuck. And I think any good person and any good country is constantly working on themselves. You can't just always congratulate yourself and say, I'm great, freedom, baby, because you're not great. None of us are great. Like, we're all trying. You know what I mean? I consider myself a pretty socially conscious person now. But, like all Americans, especially Americans who, pass as white, you're ingrained to think and believe and do some stupid shit. And then eventually someone, from a different culture or with a different perspective gets through to you, and a light bulb goes off, and all of a sudden, it's like, you start to see the world for the terrible place that it is, and you start to you see the microaggressions and everything, and you're like, oh god, people are so terrible. But because of that, I think it pushes you, if these are things that you genuinely believe in, and you're not just like woke for the sake of Instagram followers, but if these are things you actually believe in, that criticism of everything else and the systems that we're part of, and the criticism of yourself, ultimately forces you to be a better person. And I think all of us who believe in genuine social change, and I hate to use the term woke, because, like, now it's like a negative connotation amongst
Yeah.
conservative circles, but once again, those people can suck my dick. I don't care what they consider. um, but anyone who is genuinely woke should always be questioning themselves. And once you understand something, that doesn't mean that you understand every other thing, and it's always a learning process. And um we have to come to grips with who the fuck we are before we're able to make any genuine or meaningful change, however incremental it is.
Hell yeah, man. Yeah, dude. I agree 100%. 100%. All we can do is get our, do our little part, and hopefully get our message out and reach some people.
Yeah,
Um,
it
but I
takes a
feel,
village.
oh,
It really
oh
does.
yeah, it really does.
Yeah.
We can create our own little villages on Instagram, which is cool.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, man, I've gone over time with you.
That's cool, man.
Any
I'm having a good time.
yeah, me too, man. I love it's been a great time chilling, man. But
Yeah, likewise, man.
yeah, what's the your kind of, closing statements as far as, do you want to promote something? Anything, what do you see as in the
Um,
future or et
I
cetera?
mean, I would say, my website, DERFDesigns.com. You can also, if you go on Etsy, if you prefer Etsy, it's a site that I do through Etsy. I'm working on eventually having a proper retail website and stuff. These are all just kind of things that I'm doing in my spare time. But DERFDesigns.com, you can follow me on Instagram, DERF Designs. As far as my future plans, I really just want to be I want to get out there more with the people. I love to talk to people. I love to meet new people. I love finding out that people are into the shit I'm into. I love informing people about the shit that I'm into, and someone coming back to me and be like, dude, I checked out this fucking crazy movie that you told me about. I can't
Mhm.
believe it. Tell me what other movie I should watch. So I really do. I love to share and I love to talk with people and I love to smile and laugh and hug people. And now that I'm vaccinated and the world is opening up and a lot more people are vaccinated, it's my main thing for the future is just to really get out there with the people, because I love other human beings, man. As much as they fucking piss me off sometimes, and as much as they can really destroy my hope some days. People are just wonderful, and especially people who are like-minded. So that's my main goal, is just getting back out there, doing more markets, meeting people, meeting more creative people, and just kicking it with good people. I mean, as I get older, I used to be a very angry young man. And I think a lot of dudes are like that because we're socially conditioned to repress our emotions, and not tell people that you love them, and not hug your friends, and not really like let people see who you are and see you at your most joyous moments. And as I get older, I realize that, like, you only we have so little fucking time, and it goes by so fucking quickly, that, like, I just want to surround myself with dope people. I want to have fun conversations. I want to share art and share joy and smiles and laughter with people. And I know that sounds so fucking cheesy, but it's just the truth, man. Like, I just wanna be around good people, and I wanna put a smile on people's faces. So that's my ultimate overall goal, and I think I will achieve that while also promoting my art, with really just getting out there with the people and talking shit and chopping it up, and just having a good old time. You know what I mean?
Hell yeah, man. Well, I've had a good ass time hanging out with you
Likewise,
here.
man. This has been awesome.
Yeah, man. I feel like we vibe on a lot of different things. And definitely would like to have
Yeah,
you back on the podcast as it grows or builds or whatever.
I'm in, man. Whenever.
Yeah, and actually, I'll probably be in Houston in June. Maybe we could hang out
Yeah,
and grab a beer or something.
absolutely, man. Absolutely, dude. Say the word, man.
Hell yeah, man. Cool,
Yeah,
man. Well, I appreciate it again. I'll let you get to your evening. You enjoy your family, and we'll catch up soon.
cool, man. Be safe, bro.
You too, brother. Peace.
Later.